So now let's get into section 3. We're going to discuss the rise of the feudalism system and knights. When the Vikings, the Magyars, and the Muslims began their raids in the 800s, the Frankish kings were unable to defend. Nobles had to start defending their own lands. And although these nobles remained loyal to the king, they made their land independent territories. They didn't really feel the king was protecting them the best way possible. And so because of this, you're going to start seeing different groups of people defending their own land. And by land, if you remember back from chapter 15 with the Japanese history, we talked about the rise of Japanese feudalism and the samurai and stuff like that. This is going to be a lot of the same thing. When I say defending their land, I don't mean they own 10 acres. I mean they own thousands of acres that They own the Lakers. They own thousands of acres that a bunch of people lives on, and they've got to defend all this. There's communities and everything else in this. It's not just that they own 10 acres of land and they're out there, with a rifle watching to make sure that there's nothing trying to steal something. It's defending a lot of land that people live at. This is going to lead to the rise of knights, warriors who fought on horseback. These soldiers would defend the land of the nobles. And the equipment was expensive to be a knight, and few could afford it. So because of this, and this shows you just an image of what a knight looks like. Because of this, the nobles would give them fiefs, or pieces of land, instead of money for military service. This would make the knight a vassal, or a knight who promised to support a lord in exchange for land. And this system is known as feudalism, a system of promises that govern the relationship between lords and vassals. And so the idea behind it is that, okay, I can't afford to buy the stuff to defend your land, but if you will give me land, then I can afford it. Or you can, sometimes they would buy them the armor and stuff like that. And they would basically just pay these knights with land. And once they did that, they become a vassal, and this is feudalism. Very similar to the system that was set up in Japan. The ties between lords and vassals was the heart of feudalism. To defend their lands, many lords built castles. These early castles were made of wood, not stone, but they were still very effective for protection. They were basically like forts. It protected them, but it also was like a fort. And so this is going to develop the heart of feudalism. When a lord went to war, he would call on his vassal to fight with him, and a vassal had to come give his lord food and shelter if he came to visit. A knight could accept fiefs from two different lords and become a vassal of both. Now, if they went to war with each other, you'd be in some trouble because you'd be having to fight yourself. But the idea is you can, if you can keep it, if you can manage to defend both of them, you can take up multiple fiefs. So, that's what a lot of knights did. Feudalism was first created by the Franks, and it reached Britain in the 1000s under William the Conqueror, who was the French noble that brought feudalism to Britain. When a knight received a fief from the Lord, they needed a way to farm it because they didn't have time to work the field. So this would develop a new economic system where the knights allowed peasants to farm the land, and in return, the peasants had to give the knights food or other payment. So basically, they would have the land. And remember, in Japanese feudalism was the same way. The samurai would get the land, but they didn't actually live there. Sometimes in this situation, the knights would live on the fief, but they would allow other people to work the land, grow stuff, and they would just give them some food as payment for working the land, and they would get to keep a portion of it as well. The manor is the large estate owned by a knight or a lord. Usually the person overseeing the main area would be the manor. Most medieval lords kept about a third or a quarter of the land for personal use, and they would have serfs, which were workers who were tied to the land on which they lived. They were not slaves, but they couldn't leave unless the permission came from the lord. So that's how this system's all set up. About a third of the quarter of the land was used for personal use. The rest of it, you would have serfs attached to it. You would have different things, with it. that would help pay for and grow things on the land. So in the manor system, this is the social hierarchy. You got the king, of course, at the top. You have, and a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, but you would have the people who own the land. You would have the knights that would live on the land, and then you would have the serfs, the peasants that would be attached to the land and would work it, pay rent, and do things like that. The serfs spent much of their time working in the fields. It was hard work, with the men working late into the night in the fields, the women making clothes, cook, gather firewood. Even the children would help tending sheep and chickens. The whole family basically worked. You see images of medieval Europe. They're living in these little cottage-looking houses, and they're taking care of animals and crops and stuff. And that's what this is based from, or what that's based from is this. In addition to peasants and serfs, most manors had skilled workers that would also work there. The lord of the manor controlled everything that happened on his lands, and the lord and the ladies of the house lived more comfortably than everybody else did. They still didn't face easy lives with the possibility that the ones that survived disease would die in the possibility of war. So it's not like that they were just, sitting up in an ivory tower somewhere, protected, no one could touch them. No, they could still be killed in war. They could still die of disease. These knights just was basically bodyguards. They were protectors. Regardless of their social class, women in the Middle Ages had fewer rights than men. They would run the manor household, keeping up with the people that served on the land. One exception to this is Eleanor of Aquitaine, which was a French woman that gained political power. She gained political power during this time where a lot of women didn't really have any authority. In the Middle Ages, most people lived on manors and not in towns. After the year 1000, some towns started to turn into big cities. One thing that led to the growth of medieval towns was the population growth. More people, you need bigger towns. You need more areas for people to live. Towns also grew because trade increased. Exotic items from all over Asia and Africa also started to flood the market. And this growth in trade would lead to the end of feudalism, with knights wanting money and not land for their services, and serfs and peasants starting to lead the manor system for towns. So you're going to have that as these towns start to grow, you're going to start having the market being flooded with all these different things coming from different places in the world. And knights are going to say, wait a minute, all I'm getting is food that's grown on the land that I was given. I want money. And the lords are saying, we're not paying you. We're just going to give you land. And so this is going to cause people to leave the manor systems to go live in the towns and start working other types of jobs. And that brings us to the end of section